The Oilers go toe-to-toe with one of the best in the game and came away with a point, and maybe just a little bit more. Welcome to Got Your Back, brought to you by DLR Vinyl Fencing and Decking. Do it once, do it right with high-quality, maintenance-free vinyl. Call my brothers, Rick or Rob, at DLR Vinyl, locations in Calgary and Edmonton. Today on the podcast, we'll dig into what was a whale of a game here in Denver Monday night in our Park Mazda breakdown. We'll check in with Darren Dreger, courtesy Belvan Construction, on the NHL trade deadline and discuss how the Oilers and a few others fared. And in our DeBoers Who's Got Your Back segment, James Duthie tells us about a mustachioed icon who just may have saved his broadcasting career. From Denver, Colorado, on the road with the Oil, this is Got Your Back, brought to you by DLR Vinyl Products. All right, welcoming in our friend Jason Strudwick. Buddy, what a game last night, man. How are you?
I'm buzzing between trade deadline and then that, you get such a high off the trade deadline. Then the game, elite two teams going on. I loved it.
Yeah, really, really high paced. I was lucky enough. I was kind of spoiled to be on the road with the team and get to be in the building to watch that one last night. And man, it was every bit as fast as it looked on TV. We'll get to that in our breakdown in a moment. But first, we have somebody to introduce people to. Another member of the podcast that's been like lurking in the weeds for the first two episodes, just making sure everything goes smoothly. But we think we've figured out a way to actually work him in a little bit. I don't know. Do we have a nickname yet? His name is Chris Sabunia. He's in a basement in Kelowna. He wants us to call him Zuby. I'm thinking Basement Chris. I don't know, buddy. How are you? Welcome to the pod.
Chris in Kelowna, longtime listener, first-time caller.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you weren't going to come on until you got a haircut. That was in our group text. Like, I can't come on until I get a haircut. So the haircut looks good. I'm glad you're worried about that on this podcast.
I'm on the video side of things primarily, so that's always my consideration. That's my first consideration. That's why I put people listening on the podcast can't see that I put up some posters here in the basement to go with the concrete and 2x4s.
You did a nice job cleaning up your mom's basement, buddy. You took some of your posters from your bedroom upstairs and strapped them onto the wall. Attaboy.
Yeah. That's right. My Cheryl Teagues one didn't make it though.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Beat it. Time for us to get to it. But great to see you. We'll be checking in with you in the days to come. You got to make sure that everything looks and sounds okay. So we'll let you get back to work. That is Basement Chris, Kelowna Chris, Zuby. I don't know.
We'll figure it out. Have a good one, fellas.
Figure it out, man. Yeah. Okay. See you, pal. So Struddy, that game last night, man, boy, oh boy, was it something. And we're going to get to it here in our breakdown, brought to you by Park Mazda, where the newly redesigned 2022 CX-5 has arrived. Check out the brand new all-wheel drive sport design trim with its turbocharged engine and see the available colors and trims in stock at parkmazda.ca. Now, we'll get to the Oilers trade stuff after the fact. It was such a good game last night. I think we need to start there and we need to talk about that. I think that game brought something out in the Edmonton Oilers. Colorado is so good and so fast. Edmonton had no choice but to step up in a certain way. And I know they lost, but I think that game's going to serve them well.
When you're a team that's up and coming, you want to take on the best team. You want to find out what you're made of. So you kind of start the game and you're thinking it's going to go okay, and it starts going well. And, the Oilers played well. They were matching kind of shift for shift. You had the matchup of McKinnon and Draisaitl for the most part. Love that matchup. Kadri and McDavid had some matchup issues. Got Makar out there, Nurse, Mikko Rantanen. Like, there were so many talented players. And they all had a good game. Like, there was a lot of good play. I loved it. But I think for the Oilers, if they walk out of that building with 1 point, but I think more importantly, they know they can play with that team. I'm not sure if they can beat them in 7 games yet, but they believe they can play at that game. And that is a huge step forward, because it's one thing to play against the Washington and teams like that. Another to take on what I think is the best team in the Western Conference, maybe the NHL and the deepest, the Colorado Avalanche, and walk out with a very well-played game.
What'd you think of the OT winner? I mean, people online are kind of losing it a little bit because they feel that Kadri, he pulled the helmet off. And look, Darnell Nurse had to vacate the play. I mean, that's just what you have to do based on the rules. And that hurts you in overtime. You got the long change. Mm-hmm. I mean, you get mismatched like that, and that's tough. I viewed it as kind of a classic Kadri pest moment where two guys were battling, and could they have called it? Maybe. Might have felt like an odd call, but I didn't have as much of an issue with it as Oiler Nation seems to. How about you?
Yeah, Oilers fans always think that their team's getting screwed, and from the refs, and it may or may not be true. I felt that in overtime, the Oilers are on their heels, and I thought the Avs are coming at them the whole time. The puck, they kind of get it on the wall. It goes up to Kane. He can't find it. It's spinning around. Nurse is losing his helmet. Like they never quite looked organized, and that's why that first face-off is so critical. And I'm not putting the loss on McDavid because of the face-off, but. Right. You need to get possession of the puck, because when you don't have it, you're now backing off, especially when you look at the players they have out there. Guys like, Cale Makar, who I think is going to revolutionize the way they play defense, or defensemen play defense, all of this stuff. And they never really look comfortable in overtime or set up, the Oilers did. And that helmet coming off was just one more piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, a couple of breaks, right? On the one goal, I think the ref might have gotten in the way of a puck, and then Kadri pulls the helmet off and there's no call. I think there's reason for Oiler fans to sort of feel like, that was frustrating. So I sympathize to agree. Expand on that a little bit. Cale Makar and Revolution. I mean, not everybody has that skill set that he has. He is absolutely unique, but probably changes the way every young defenseman watching the game right now thinks about what's possible.
I remember when Sidney Crosby came to the league, I was like, who is this guy and what is he going to do to me? Like, it was just, and now you look at, 10 years
He's going to expose you for being a depth defenseman.
Well, I changed every time he got on the ice, even in warm-up. I wouldn't take warm up with him because I didn't want to get embarrassed in warm-up. So, he changed, and you look now 10 years later, you have the McKinnons, you have the McDavids, right? And the McDavid way kids are going to play. They're going to watch and want to play with him. Growing up, I wanted to play like Wendell Clark, Bob Probert. And so these guys are changing it. Fast forward to today, Cale Makar. I remember the first time I watched him play. He and Samuel Girard, I don't think they knew that defensemen should be standing on the offensive zone blue line. They were all over the ice, and they are the true rovers. And I'll stick with Makar for this. He covers so much ice. He's so quick. The offensive skills he has. And as a defender, when you have a D-man who's roving all over the offensive zone, it is a complete nightmare. Now, Scott Niedermayer guys used to do it a little bit like that, but not Pronger, not Lidstrom, Chris Chelios. These guys stayed on the blue line. So he's going to change the way that defensemen play, and more coaches are going to be asking their skilled defensemen to jump in and to make it really challenging. And it is a defensive nightmare to have a D-man in the zone.
Well, and he's a nightmare for the wingers, because generally the wingers got to cover the point man, right? But Makar has this way of, he'll touch pass, take 2 strides and step around a guy, and he just exposes you if you're not careful. And I think we saw him do that a couple of times last night. I wanted to touch on the Oiler penalty kill a little bit, and we're going to get to Kato Yamamoto in a minute because he was off the charts last night. But I'm seeing something on the penalty kill, Struds, that I don't want to overstate this, but we saw this when Todd McClellan was here. They have this formation. It's like this I formation where they stack up through the middle, right? Everybody knows they don't want to let that pass across the middle of the ice to McKinnon standing over there. But I felt they were getting exposed big time over on the right side of their penalty kill, because they slide it over there to that half wall, and the forward goes to cut off the defenseman. And it isolates a 2-on-1 down low. It happened 3 or 4 times in that game. And I thought for sure the Avs were going to isolate that and get a power play goal in the third period, and they almost did. I don't like that sign that I'm seeing from the Oiler penalty kill, and I think the pre-scouts are going to pick that apart.
Well, first off, let's talk about the big penalty kill in the third. That was a huge moment, especially when they have momentum. I thought that was a huge job by the Oilers to get it done. You're right. They're trying to cut across. They don't want to have that pass go across. The challenge, I think it happens, and we saw it for sure in the first goal, is it makes it difficult for the D-men to line up with the shooter on the flank. And you've got to somehow make that a harder shot to get through, because you had McKinnon last night on one side. I think, is it Ranson on the other side, or maybe it was Kushkin. It just makes it really hard. So you have to line up. You have to be perfect in your position where you're at. What I liked in their last penalty kill, they had their sticks more in the lanes. And your stick has to be, so if I'm skating out to the point and I stop and I got to come back, my stick has to be the first thing to come back, so that now my stick's in the lane. And when your stick's on that lane, they can zip it back and forth, and it's really hard for everyone to get back in place. So it's a good power play they have. Honestly, I think, the first goal was a bit of an unlucky bounce. I would like to see that D-man line up a little differently, but they need to solve this. The power play, I'm not worried about. The 5-on-5 plays improved, but the penalty kill is massive for this group. And this has to be internally. Now, getting Nuge back will probably help as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll watch because I've noticed it over the last couple of games too, over on that right side on the penalty kill. We'll see if it's an adjustment they make or if it's something that teams continue to pick apart. Because on that third period penalty kill, they had two really good chances to score from that right side. So we'll see moving forward. Kyler Yamamoto, a couple of penalties, but man, and sticking penalties you don't love. But if I'm a teammate of Kyler Yamamoto's last night, I'm killing that penalty all night long because he somehow at 155 pounds soaking wet has found a way, Struddy, to play a heavy game, which is mind numbing for me.
Yeah, he's a very light player, but he had a great game last night. The penalties, he's got to get those out. Like you just can't take those, especially neutral zone one.
Yeah.
But what I like about him, and I've been saying this about him for a while, and there's a lot of people that don't like him. He's a puck retriever. Right. He goes and gets the puck. And that's why people like to play with him. I coach a lot of young kids and I say, why are you always the guy in front of the net that wants to shoot the puck? Players, especially skilled players, want to play with guys that go and get the puck back, whether that's on the forecheck, whether they stall on that initial forecheck or the way they back check. Those things are massive. And Yamamoto does that all night long. And he's not afraid. I love the interaction with Mikko Rantanen. Mikko is one of my top
looking up at him. He's
I love
looking up at him like this.
100%. Mikko's one of my top 3 favorite players in the NHL. I love the way that guy plays. And you can see Mikko's right. I was like, what is this little bug doing?
What is happening?
But Yamo did it. And I love that play by him. And his teammates saw that. I thought he was really engaged physically. I thought Kane was engaged physically, like noticeably. And some other guys weren't. I'd like to see more from Puljujarvi. I'd like to see more from Fogle.
Yeah. Hyman wasn't great.
Guys, no, no, and I don't know if he's really a physical player. I think he maybe his game is more getting to the hard areas. But the two guys I mentioned, Fogle and Puljujarvi, they need to be physical. They need to bring what Yamamoto and Kane did because Kane had a couple penalty or hits. Honestly, Schauger, that I thought they're a little bit borderline non-calls.
Oh yeah, he is aggressive, man. Like he was a gamer.
Yeah,
and I really feel. I asked Yamamoto about this last night after the game. I really feel like Evander Kane's presence. I think he's dragging guys into the fight.
Sure.
Since he's arrived here.
Yeah, and I would agree that. Because when you are a player like him and a bigger guy that can skate, and you are not doing what he's doing, the physicality, you're showed up. You can see it. So, I mean, I think it's got to get to a point where Kane talks to some of these guys that I point out, say you've got to be more physical. Like we need you to be physical because I thought the physicalities game in last night's game was one of the highest we've seen in Oilers game in quite some time. But there's still more guys that can find it, and you might not like it, but when you want to be a winning team, you have to get out of your comfort zone. And the two guys I mentioned, Puljujarvi and Fogle, they've got to find it.
Yeah, Ryan McLeod needs to start finishing some checks too. He skates way too fast and shows up on time and swings away from too many checks. Love a lot of elements in his game, but when playoffs start, for the amount of time he's going to spend on the ice against good players, he needs to finish checks. On Yamamoto, just real quick, last point. I think you could make the argument that the last couple playoff series he's been shoved out of. Mm-hmm. It seems to me like he is bracing himself in his game to ensure that he doesn't get pushed out of anything. And I think that's a really good sign. And we're seeing him consciously do that.
Well, I could hear people thinking that, as I was watching the game last night and he was playing so physical, but he's learning how to compete in his body size at that level. It gets a lot tighter in the playoffs. There's even last night, there was very little room, at times it was a really tight game. So he's going to have to figure that out to be a successful player for this Edmonton Oilers team. Yeah. But the challenge for him is that, if I was playing against Colorado, the first couple of games, I would tell my forwards to get every hit you can on Taves and Makar. Yeah. Finish those guys. And sometimes you hit them, then you accidentally fall down. It's a couple rib punches. They've got to make it hard on them. So Yamamoto, he can't necessarily do that, but he can be hard to play against the way he puts his intensity in the forecheck and then kind of rub guys out and make them work extra hard to get the puck. So that'll be the key against that team. Yeah, they've got some high-end stars up front, but those 2D, you need to be on them. And, Yamamoto will be challenged in that area with the physicality.
One last point on Yamamoto for me. I like the fact that he finishes checks at the point. It's hard as a forward to race out to a guy that has the puck, who's got forward momentum and hit him. And not enough forwards do it, but it disrupts him just enough that if the play gets messed up, that he's a little bit out of position. Not enough forwards finish checks at the blue line. And I like the fact that Yamamoto does, and I don't think enough players do it.
That's a really good point that I hadn't noticed. But he's working. He's working as hard as he can to contribute. He does have to watch those penalties though, because man, that's like 3 last night. That's tough. That's a really tough one. And then you go
for sure.
Two power play goals is the killer.
You want to be stripping pucks as often as he does. You're riding right on the edge. And I don't know if do you play video games? You play like the NHL, EA Sports NHL games? There's a button in that. It's like the Yamamoto button.
Okay.
Where if you want to strip the puck from somebody, you push a button and you can lift the stick. Yeah. But you take a penalty like all the time. And it's like Yamamoto's just jamming on that button as he's playing. And I'm thinking, right on the line there. So anyway, great contribution from him. Lost in the shuffle last night. Real good performance from Mike Smith. That's a good sign. That's a couple of decent outings for him. That really changes the complexion moving forward, because I sensed Stuart Skinner was going to be checking into the fray here soon. They might be able to delay that with what they're getting from Mike Smith quickly.
I'm not a goalie coach, but I know that I like seeing a settled goaltender behind me. And I thought he looked very settled. And I think that's 2 performances now. We've seen him look settled. And I think that calms down, well, obviously it feels good for him, but it calms down the defenseman. So, you're starting to see some good things here from both goalies, but Mike Smith for sure.
Something bugging me. You can tell me if I'm out of line or overthinking it. And I want to preface this by saying Leon Draisaitl was a gamer last night. Played really well, back check hard, conscientious defensively. He was in that game. So this is an overall comment. This is not just about last night's performance. The one thing that bugs me about Draisaitl, because I was watching a playoff speed game going on out there, his changes are brutal. He is so slow to the bench, and you can see his teammates waiting to go and got to go. And that coach wants to push guys up ice. When I see Leon Draisaitl busting his ass to the bench on a change, that'll be meaningful to me. Listen, I'm not criticizing. He's a brilliant player. This is such a small detail, but it bugs me. Does it bug you?
It does, because it is a detail that's easy to change, but unfortunately,
easy.
This is a reality. Let's mark this down. And what's going to happen is it's going to cost them a goal, an important goal in the playoffs, and that's when it'll change. Because players don't understand how hard you have to change going off and coming on the ice. And I guarantee you this will cost them a goal, whether it's down the stretch drive here or in the playoffs.
All right. They're just going to clip this comment and put it on Twitter, and we're going to get killed for attacking the Draisaitl. We just podcasted or radioed ourselves here, Struddy, but I had to say it. I've been thinking it for a long time. It was time for it to be said. He's a brilliant player. So many elements of his game are great. Got to hustle to the bench. There's a guy sitting there waiting to come on, and his contributions are super valuable. Hustle and get to the bench.
No, it's the energy coming off, energy going on. No, you're 100% right.
All right. Great breakdown on the game last night. That was brought to you by Park Mazda, your dealer for life in Sherwood Park off Wire Road. Visit parkmazda.ca. Let's dive into trade deadline quick. 2 acquisitions in Kulak and Brassard. The other team eats half the salaries. Ken Holland made it clear that he's right snuggled up to the cap within a couple of $1,000. Struds, what's your summation of what he was able to get done?
Well, I'll start the forward first. Brassard, I think he's an insurance policy. I'm not sure where he fits in. I think he competes somewhere from that 10 to 12 spot nightly in the lineup, depending on what you want. I think he maybe can bring some offense, move up and down the lineup a little bit. But I don't think that he is the crucial piece. I think the Kulak piece really, to me, fills out the Oilers' bottom 6 or the Oilers' 6 defensemen. And I'm guessing he'll start with Barrie. I think he pairs well with offensive defensemen. And he's got some mobility, not a physical D. I would have liked to see a more physical D coming in. But he does solidify that spot. And then, you got to have guys like Russell or Broberg. They're able to come in if there's injuries.
I interviewed Ken Holland after the deadline yesterday, and he referred to Kulak as he's a top 4 guy. I think he said, a middle pairing, I think is kind of what he meant. And it'd be interesting to see if he can push Duncan Keith, and if he ends up where they end up minutes wise. I think Keith's minutes will come down a little bit, which is okay. And I think Kulak will be a pretty regular contributor. The one thing that's notable to me with him, though, as I dove into his minutes, he doesn't kill penalties. And I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought that was something that they needed to add because the guys that they have killing penalties right now, I think they end up in some situations that aren't ideal.
Yeah. So, I look at this defensive core. They don't have a star, but a Pietrangelo or a Drew Doughty. So they're going to have like a division of labor. So I see it as Bouchard and Barrie killing penalties on the power play. Yeah. And I see Nurse, CC, your first 2 to kill penalties. And then I would like to see Keith and Kulak in this situation, the next 2. This is assuming a forward takes a penalty. Yeah. So if Kulak doesn't have that ability to kill penalties, it really changes things up because A, he's not getting on the power play, and B, he's not getting the penalty kill. His minutes drop down right away. Just because you're not getting extra juice. So, and then who becomes that other penalty killer? Is it Barry? Is it Bouchard? I think they're better suited for the power play right now.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. So I think they got to get him up and running and get him feeling comfortable about it. So, if you don't kill much, do you know the lanes to get into? Do you know where to put your stick? How to stand up? And not back in your own zone. Try to hold that position on the flank so guys can come in and shoot. So it is very notable because with that division of labor, he's the odd guy looking out. Looking in from outside.
On Ken Holland's strategy overall, look, I want to say this. A big part of their trade deadline was Evander Kane, and that came early. And I think Oilers fans do need to keep that in mind. And I think that's fair to point that out on their behalf. But what I would say is that I think he did a good job with the cap space that he had. Had to up the draft picks a little bit to get the salary retention. So I think given the position he was in, I think he did a good job. But, and there's a big but here, he was in the position he was in because he put himself there. He had all kinds of cap space in the summer. I said it at the time. I don't think they grinded hard enough on the Duncan Keith deal. And the $1.5 million in retention that should have happened in that deal with Chicago that didn't, that is the difference between another meaningful addition yesterday. So good day considering the position they were in, but they were in that position because I think in a couple of instances, didn't grind hard enough, quite frankly. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I wonder how much that would change the outcome. So let's say they did have that extra $1.5 million.
Yeah.
How much would that have changed this outcome? Like, would they have been in on Sherrod? Would they have been in on Manson? Like the price paid for those guys, Lindholm, those are significant costs for acquisition. And I wasn't ready for the Oilers. Actually, I don't think it was the year for them to go in at that level.
Really?
Yeah.
Like Struds, if they had the cap space, what are you waiting for? Like you're looking out east and you got general managers firing first round picks out the door.
Right.
Like it's junk mail. And I'm not saying that you need to be reckless about it, but they didn't have the cap space to be aggressive with their first round pick. If they did and still weren't aggressive with it, I'd be all over them.
Really?
I don't think there's any reason to wait, bud.
See, I just look at, how many of those first round picks have a huge impact when we trade them away for a player. When's like you look at last year, like the Toronto trade, Foligno. Now,
right.
Derek Savard last year for Tampa Bay.
We'll make a better trade, I guess, is what I would say.
Right.
But you're right.
So I hear what you're saying, but I don't feel even if the cap space was there, he would have gone big game hunting in the way that you're talking.
Yeah. I don't know what you're waiting for. You got two of the best players on the planet in their prime. And I get it. They were tight against the cap and they couldn't. But this idea of not the right year to push the chips in,
Right.
If they had the cap space to do it and didn't, again, I'd be all over them because I just don't understand what you're waiting for. These are two of the best players in the world and they are ready now. And they have as deep a group of forwards around them as they have ever had in the time that they're here. Right. And I think I watched that game last night against Colorado and I think that group of forwards is close. This D isn't there. And if they'd have had a little more cap space to work with and been willing to put that first round pick in play, maybe it could have been a different deadline and a different shaped blue line. But they didn't have the cap space and they weren't aggressive with it. But maybe we'll agree to disagree. I think it's go time all day long, buddy, if they have the space.
Well, I know you love to roll the dice. You are all about doubling down. I'm more of a conservative guy. I go with $100 to the casino. I come back with $100 and a $20 gift certificate from the buffet.
Well, they must have been on the horn with you yesterday. Then maybe you were giving them a little strategic. Right? Listen, I'm being a little bit hard on them, but I think Oilers fans feel like this is the moment. And quite frankly, as an analyst of this team, I feel like you're in the moment and would have been great if they would have been positioned to be more aggressive and put a first round pick in play, and bring in something that is really moves the dial on the back end. They weren't in position to do it with their cap. but I think it would have been great. Awesome discussion, Struds. Appreciate it. Great stuff. When we come back, TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger is going to join us to break down the other parts of Deadline Day. No James Duthie today. He'll be in our Who's Got Your Back segment, but plenty more to come here on Got Your Back, brought to you by DLR Vinyl Products. Hey, Struddy, question for you. Have you ever tried putting in your own fence?
I sure have. Between digging the posts, mixing up cement and digging the holes, it's absolute killer.
It's brutal on the back. Well, listen, what if I told you you could put in a fence without having to dig a hole or mix any concrete?
I'd be much more likely to come over and help you out.
Yeah, well, you're not the first guy I would call, but thank you for that. Listen, my brother's company, DLR Vinyl Products, they've come up with a system where you can actually put high-quality vinyl fence in the ground without having to dig a hole, without having to mix any concrete. They can teach do-it-yourselfers how to do it, and they can also work with contractors who might be looking to start installing vinyl. It's super high-quality product. The great thing about it is that it has fantastic longevity. You put it in, you don't have to worry about staining or sanding or anything like that. I've been lucky enough, Struddy. They've put in multiple fences in my different yards and they've built me 3 decks. I have totally abused the fact that my family is in the fencing and decking business, but it's great product. Give Rob a call in Calgary or Rick a call here in Edmonton. This is a company my dad started. It's a family business. I'm super proud of it, and I'm very proud that they are our title sponsors. That's DLR Vinyl Products in Edmonton and Calgary. Hey, it's Ryan Rishaug. While many are feeling the sting of inventory shortages, Park Mazda has you covered. They've got new Mazdas arriving every month, including the redesigned 22CX-5 in whatever color you're looking for. They've also got a huge selection of used vehicles with new arrivals every week and some of the most competitive interest rates on cars, trucks, SUVs, and more. Park Mazda, your dealer for life in Sherwood Park, off Y Road. Schedule a test drive at parkmazda.ca. All right, time now to dig into some trade talk as we welcome in Darren Dreger, courtesy Belvan Construction, specializing in the design, planning, and construction of restaurants, office spaces, professional clinics, and retail spaces. Visit belvanconstruction.com. I'm a little nervous. For the first time on the podcast, we have Struds and Dregs together, and I fear for what might be about to come.
I'm too tired to bug you, other than the fact that, not that there's anything wrong with the Super 6 or Super 8 hotels that I know that you like to stay in, but you could have done a little bit of work in prepping this. I'm looking at Struddy's background. Granted, he's at home.
What?
Where are you? I know you're in Denver, but
I'm in a hotel room, man. I got a suite. I got a couch, and I got a light, and I got a picture. This is high end, bud. Well, I don't get to stay on the top floor like you and James when I go on the road.
You're going to have to invest in a little bit of backlighting or something, because the hotel lamp isn't getting it done. Anyway, what do you got for me?
Yeah. Well, let's dig into it. What was it? 33 trades, 54 players. How would you rate that deadline day, just in terms of workflow, the trades, and how it worked all behind the scenes on Tradecentre?
I would say predictable, to be fair. And look, I think for the most part, it was a good market for both the buyer and the seller. It was void of any of the top name guys, right? Like, we knew Giroux, Sherrod, all those guys have been moved prior. With all due respect to Justin Braun and some of the other pieces that were moved, there were some interesting pieces moved. Andrew Kopp of the Winnipeg Jets, but I thought that the market had been established with some of those pre-trades. So I think that the guys who moved out pieces actually did very well. Now we're going to find out in the long term here whether or not the Montreal Canadiens can transform all of the picks that they generated of the players they moved, or Andrew Kopp and what the Winnipeg Jets got in return for him. I mean, who knows how that's all going to develop in the years to come. But I actually thought it played out the way I expected it was going to play out, in that, as I said, teams that were looking to improve, I think they did. Modestly, I don't see any game changers that moved yesterday, but I think that probably 6, 8, maybe 10 teams got better, and that's what you look for from the trade deadline.
Dregs, can you give us some sense of what does it mean when there's an exchange of between two teams, a trade, and there's retention of salary? How do teams value that salary as far as is it you go by how much it is, whatever, like how do they understand how that works? Because it's unclear for a lot of people what that is worth.
Yeah, well, it's worth a lot, to be fair, because it's normally when you've got a retention of salary, it's a deal maker and can be a deal breaker. You're talking about clubs that normally need to move out some money, and they realize that they've got to pay a sweetener to do that. It can be an additional draft pick, and we've seen that a couple of times. We saw that leading up to trade deadline where, you've got 2 seconds and a third or something like that, or a first and a fourth, and that fourth round pick would be to retain some money. So it is incredibly important. But then beyond that, you get into the real deep, dark, complicated stuff where you've got players who aren't even playing anymore, like Brian Little again from the Winnipeg Jets. He's not playing again. His deal gets shipped to Arizona. There was all kinds of talk leading into the weekend that maybe Arizona was going to acquire the contract to Shea Weber from the Montreal Canadiens. So when you're dealing in moving out contracts or cap space and teams acquiring the cap space, it's currency, man. And we were reminded, Struddy, probably by 3 or 4 teams going into the weekend, hey, don't forget to talk about our cap space. Yeah. And that was Arizona, and that was San Jose, and that was Buffalo and Ottawa to some degree. So they're literally shopping it, right? They're saying, hey, you need us to park. Well, we'll park some money, but it's going to cost you a draft pick. So, but how do you identify what the pick is? I think that's subjective. And I think it just speaks to how desperate the team is to make sure that the club is retaining some salary.
Listen, we kind of risk dating the podcast here in case there's news in the next few hours on this, but can you let us know where things are at in this moment in that trade with Vegas and Anaheim and Dadonov? And it felt like it got real messy in the late hours last night.
There's no other way to describe it other than messy. And I just know that the sources that reached out to me from Vegas's perspective, are trying to pin this on Ottawa and the National Hockey League. The part that I don't understand, though, is so you look at Dadonov getting traded from the Ottawa Senators to the Vegas Golden Knights last July. I mean, you go on Cap Friendly, any of the database sites, and you can see the trade protection of basically every player. Now, in fairness, these sites can make mistakes, right? And so should it be considered a trusted source? Yeah, for us. I look at Cap Friendly probably 10 times a day. I trust the information there. But the messaging that I got was that Vegas did not know that Dadonov had the no trade list when he was acquired from Ottawa. Ottawa didn't submit it. The National Hockey League didn't have a record of it. And so there it goes. Now, as the story continues to develop, and you're right, I mean, chances are there's going to be some form of resolution, not today, then at some point this week. You can't have a player twisting in the wind. Yeah. I mean, the Players Association is involved. Central Registry is continuing to investigate how this happened. I'm more interested, not just in the outcome, because guys, I strongly believe this deal is going to get voided. That's the way it looks. That's the way it looks. So, if the league discovers that there's some sketchy business here, does Vegas get further sanctioned? Yeah. I doubt it, because how does the NHL let a deal like that go through without knowing that all of the protection was there? So this one is to be determined.
Yeah. The thing that blows my mind too, sorry, Struddy, is, I mean, nobody has ever said, does that player have a no trade and is Anaheim on it? I mean, who has Anaheim, California on their no trade list? I could get it if you get dealt to Edmonton. Everyone's like, well, okay, is there a list or is there, but Anaheim on a no trade?
Well, the other thing too is, and I didn't get this from Vegas, but since this story, erupted Monday night, teams are reaching out to me saying, well, McCrimmon was shopping Dadonov to us. And that was well in advance of the deadline. Right. So, if you're a smaller market team, whomever the team is, isn't that one of the first questions you ask if you're even entertaining the idea of acquiring Dadonov or any player for that matter? Well, does he have a no trade list? Are we on it? No, I better check. So this one it's a bad look for the National Hockey League because it squeaked through, but it's going to get real fugly for the Vegas Golden Knights, because if they're not able to move out that money,
oh boy, then
they're going to have to start sitting players. I mean, that's pretty obvious. As players come back, players are going to have to go out because they just don't have the cap space to get through it.
Unreal. Now, sticking with the Anaheim Ducks, how much did the plan change once Verbeek was named GM with the 3 players they shipped up? Well, 4 if you want to count Delory, because it seemed like he was like, we're starting fresh.
Yeah, well, it definitely shifted for sure. I think he just came in with fresh perspective and looked at where the team is at. And look, I think we could all understand that Anaheim overachieved in the first half of the season, right?
Sure.
And they've got some wonderful young pieces. In fact, they've got a long list of them. But I think fresh eyes came in Pat Verbeek, and he just went, you know what? Here's why I look at Hampus Lindholm. Excuse me. Here's where I look at Rickard Rakell. Here's how I look at Josh Manson. I know I'm not going to be able to retain all 3 of those guys pending UFAs. What's my ceiling on term and money? And he didn't mess around. So as soon as he exhausted that, especially with Lindholm, he just went, nope, we'll find that player somewhere else. Maybe we have it internally. And they quickly shifted over to the trade front.
Heard also that they at least explored the option of Jake DeBrusk as well in a deal potentially involving Rakell. Jake DeBrusk ends up not getting traded yesterday. Does get the new contract. He'll finish out the season with the Boston Bruins, maybe go on a bit of a run. We'll see. And then we'll see if something gets done in the offseason. Big picture, Dregs, was there a standout performance in this deadline? I won't say deadline day. Let's call it deadline week. Was there a standout performance for you from someone?
Oh, well, you're right. I mean, we're not going to go through all of the pieces that moved leading up to deadline. I think the 2 Florida teams, I mean, that's an arms race right there in Florida between the Lightning and the Florida Panthers. I got all the time in the world. And Struddy, I'm sure you'd have loved to, maybe you did play for managers who had that type of clout and wherewithal. For Julian Brisebois to step up and say, look, I think Brandon Hagel's going to give us cost certainty. We love the way he plays the game. I'll give you 2 firsts. Like honestly, how many GMs in hockey are looking at this going, Kenny Holland, we're not trading our first round pick. We need goaltending. We need this. But we're not. But I understand that too, because there comes a time with every organization where you do got to claw back and just say, okay, the cupboard is bare and we need to fix that. But Jeff Vinik, the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning, is going, you know what I like? I like winning Stanley Cups. Yeah. And 3 sounds better than 2. 4 sounds better than 3. So I just love the aggressiveness of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But you know what? Billy Guerin, I talked to him 2 weeks ago. He didn't think they were going to do much. And I'm never playing poker with Bill Guerin because he bluffs me every single year. And he did again. Now, they went through some rough patches, I would say, in the last couple of weeks. But he stayed on Marc-Andre Fleury. I don't think that he overpaid to get him. Nick Delorier was a nice little lad, scores a goal for them last night. I mean, he did some things around that Minnesota Wild team that I would think would catch the attention of the St. Louis Blues and some of the other clubs in that division. So, I mean, that one jumps off the page for me, Minnesota. And then you can, New York added, Andrew Kopp is no slouch. Tyler Mott gives them, again, depth there. And they got the defensive piece that a lot of teams were chasing in Justin Braun. So those are probably a few of the notable teams.
Can you make them understand why in the Domi trade, why 2 adversaries would help each other out as far as retaining salary there in Florida? I like to be a good friend too, Dregs, but I'm not sure I understand
Debatable. Debatable.
Why what's the thought process there?
I'm so glad you asked this question because I should have mentioned it a second ago as part of the notables. You know why it happened? In my opinion, neither general manager I haven't asked, but it's the only way it makes sense. Bill Zito loves Jarmo Kekalainen, and Jarmo Kekalainen loves Bill Zito. They're old buddies, right?
Okay.
So I think that this was just a way for the only way this deal was going to go through is if there was that third party involved.
Okay.
So Max Domi ends up in Carolina. The Carolina Hurricanes are glad to have him expiring contract, but to make it work, they needed that Florida team to step up. I don't think Billy Zito is doing the Carolina Hurricanes a favor in this fashion, unless his good buddy Jarmo Kekalainen is a big part of that deal.
Interesting. Relationships run deep when you're starting to make NHL trades. With, I mean, that's
well, otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, that's got to be the explanation. Listen, Struds and I have already talked about it quite a bit, but I just want to get your thoughts on Ken Holland's day. In Brassard and Kulak, he adds a couple of pieces that are probably going to play every night. And he also, I think, did a decent job in keeping the numbers down. Like he shaved salaries by half on both of them. But I don't know, Dregs, from the outside looking in, does it feel like it was an aggressive enough tact from Holland and the Oilers when you consider Evander Kane also earlier in the year? Yeah,
probably not for the fan base. Probably not. But I'm intrigued by it. I think for the most part, Evander Kane has been a good ad for the Oilers. I think you guys would agree with that.
Yeah.
Brett Kulak was rounding his game in Montreal. So he's going to have more responsibility, more opportunity, but also more pressure too, right? There's no pressure in Montreal based on how terrible their season was. Marty St. Louis comes in and things change a little bit. But everything I know of Brett Kulak, they liked him in Montreal. He was one of the pieces, he and Arturi Lehkonen, who they both traded, who they were okay if they didn't trade Brett Kulak or Arturi Lehkonen. So they got the return that they needed, but it didn't seem like a huge overpay for me from Edmonton's perspective. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, time will tell. But I thought given the prices that the Oilers paid, Kenny did pretty well.
Yeah. All right. Great stuff, Dregs. Where's James, by the way? Where's your sidekick?
He's on a plane, man. He's going to his...
He bolts quickly, hey?
Well, yeah, I mean, but this is a difference in between, you and I and Duthie. I'm not going to speak on Struddy's behalf, but I mean, how many of us actually own property in the Caribbean or Caribbean?
Does he? He's a property owner there. He's not just.
Yeah. Well, he's there like 7 times a year. It's ridiculous.
He's the first tan. Keep his tan up.
I know.
All right. Good stuff, Dregs. We'll let you get to whoever just walked into the room there. Thanks for doing this.
Alex,
and we'll check in a few days, pal.
Alex just walked in to grab Tiny, the Ray and Dregs podcast mascot. The great
nice.
She just went for a walk. I'm surprised she didn't bark at you on the way by.
I'm surprised that you waited like 12 minutes before you mentioned your podcast.
She'd disapprove of your crappy hotel room too.
All right, beat it. We're done with you. This Darren Dreger this week, presented by Belvan Construction, specializing in design, planning, and construction of restaurants, office spaces, professional clinics, and retail spaces. Visit belvanconstruction.com. We'll see you, buddy. Coming up next, we do actually check in with James Duthie on tape in his Who's Got Your Back segment, brought to you by DeBoers. Get yourself straightened out and decked out for the new golf season at DeBoers. You're listening to Got Your Back, presented by DLR Vinyl Products.
If you're a business owner looking for a general contractor to build or renovate your business, no matter how big or small, Belvan Construction should be your first call. Specializing in the design, planning, and construction of restaurants, office spaces, professional clinics, and retail spaces, Belvan can assist you from start to finish. Learn more by going to belvanconstruction.com.
Folks, golf season is just around the corner, and I don't know about you, but I am some kind of fired up over it. It's the perfect time to get yourself fitted for new clubs or some great new apparel. Well, DeBoers has you covered for all of it. Their facility is first class with amazing TrackMan technology in their simulators and top-of-the-field fitting specialists. You can order now for spring delivery, and they've also got a bunch of new 22 apparel for you to go check out. It's a fantastic group down there at DeBoers. The shop has a great positive feel. I highly recommend you check them out on the corner of 53rd Street and 99th Avenue. DeBoers, helping you play better golf since 1999. Average Joe's Sports Bar in Sherwood Park has proudly served the community and supported minor sports in the area for almost 20 years. It's a great gathering place for sports fans. Average Joe's has massive big screen TVs, comfortable seating, and a friendly staff waiting to make your experience anything but average. Come check it out on Baseline Road, right next to Home Depot, or make a reservation by calling 780-417-1113. That's Average Joe's on Baseline Road in Sherwood Park. All right, time now for Who's Got Your Back, brought to you by DeBoers, helping you play better golf, your local golf shop for the last 23 years. Struds, have you had a chance to meet James Duthie a few times?
Pretty briefly. He's a hard guy to get around, right? He's got a pretty tight circle of friends, and I think from a distance he glanced my way.
Oh, that must have been big for you. Big for you.
Big moment.
I've had the pleasure of being on the road with him for about 15 years now. Played one of the worst pranks ever on him. And maybe when he's on this show again in a week or two, he can tell that story. Still feel bad to this day. So we'll tease that a few episodes down the road. Still shocked he agreed to do this show regularly after the prank that I pulled on him. But anyways, all jokes aside, we know he's one of the most talented, successful hosts on the continent. I'm choking this out. He's uniquely talented. He wrote this for me. But his path to TSN stardom was definitely no guarantee. He contributed a fantastic Who's Got Your Back story here for the podcast. Here is Jimmy.
Hey, it's James Duthie. So many years ago, I believe it was 1947. No, I think 1998. I got an audition at TSN, and I was so nervous. Heart was pounding. I knew this was my one chance probably to make it. And I was sitting on the desk that was then sports desk. And back then, the legend was Jim Van Horn, the mustache, who anchored the 6 p.m. sports desk. And he was in there that day. So I do my first take, and then they said, okay, you're going to do one more take. And unbeknownst to me, I guess JVH was watching. So he pokes his head around the corner and says, kid, you're doing good, but slow down your delivery a little bit and amp up the energy. And I was like, okay, thank you, Mr. Van Horn. And did another one and was able to land my dream job. So here was a guy who, he had no business caring less about some pencil neck kid. I'm sure they had auditions in there going all the time, but took the time to watch, to care, and to, in the end, help me get my gig at TSN. So Jim Van Horn had my back that day, and I will never forget it. Boys, best of luck with the podcast. I will listen all the time as long as Rishaug promises to never, ever break out the guitar. Struddy, keep him in line.
Yes, thank you, James. I don't have the guitar on the road with me. Otherwise, I would be playing it as we speak. Yes. Struddy, have you recall somebody maybe in the NHL back when you were a young guy playing that gave you a little attention or gave you a little bit of hope?
I sure do. Doug Huda, when I was with the Islanders, I was one of the last cuts with the Islanders of my 20-year-old year. And I was upset. I was upset. It was the first time I'd been cut from the NHL team. I knew it was coming, but still upset. And he just pulled me over and said, hey man, keep doing what you're doing. Within a couple of years, you're going to be here. And at 20, you don't want to hear that. 2 years sounds like 1,000 years, but it was quick. And, it goes by quick. And he was right. It was 2 years. And, I've always been waiting for a chance to talk to Hoods about that, because it was when someone is a veteran talks to you and just kind of reminds you it's going to be okay. It has huge impact on you. And I always try to do that for the kids that would get sent down when I was playing.
Did he have a mustache?
At that time, no. But we called him Skeletor. I don't know. He was very ripped, and he had kind of like not much hair and veins in his head. Like he looked like Skeletor. But so it's very similar to James. A very similar story, right? People don't understand. It's a small detail, but a big impact.
Did you say veins in his head?
Oh, he did. Yeah, on the side, you could see it. Like Skeletor had the veins coming out of the side of his head.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what Hoods had. And I think he went on to be a pretty good coach with Boston, won some Stanley Cup, I think there.
Doug Huda, the Jim Van Horn of the NHL world. Who would have thought? Anyways, thanks, James, for that contribution. Remember, we want to hear from you as well. If you have a story about a time where someone had your back, you can send it to us at gybpod@gmail.com. That is gybpod@gmail.com. Send us a message to our Average Joe's inbox. Listen, we got all different types of messages. Really thankful for all the ones that people have sent in. Some want their names mentioned, others ask not to. So today's message from the Average Joe's inbox will be from Anonymous. It says, "It may seem small to some, but I live in a small town I'm not particularly fond of and have an 18-month-old son. Being separated from family has been tough with COVID and our first child. I've always been a gamer, which is naturally much more difficult with a new kid." Yes, it would be. Gaming was my one way to connect with some of my closest friends who live over an hour away. When my buddy and his brother both ended up getting a PS5, I was not in a place where I could find one or buy one. Last Christmas, my buddy went searching with me, knowing that, and he found me he went searching without me knowing, and he found me a PS5.
Mm-hmm.
It might not seem like a big deal, but those are still incredibly hard to find. And I was having a really hard time with a few things. So it meant the world to me. And that comes to us from Anonymous. I totally relate to this one, Struddy, because full disclosure, I went into a video game binge for probably about 10 months during this pandemic, where I started hopping online with my cousin Dan and my cousin Clayton. And I'm not ashamed of it. Like, it was a great way to stay connected because you just felt like you were seeing people and talking to people. But I totally feel that. And I don't know, it would have been crappy not to have had the opportunity to, we're all just looking for ways to connect through this, weren't we?
Oh, 100%. And we did a lot of Zoom calls with friends and things like that. We played poker online. So I get it. I think that's a great story. I love that he did it, unbeknownst to him.
Yeah, no question about it. And again, we want to hear your stories. So send them to our Average Joe's inbox, gybpod@gmail.com. We got some swag on the way. My intention is to give away some swag. Maybe we'll pick an email a month or something like that and send you a hat or a mug or something. We're still working on that, but maybe in future shows. Struddy, thanks, buddy. Another fun show. Really enjoyed doing this with you, my friend.
Can't wait till the next one, buddy.
All right. Oilers and Dallas Stars set to go. So we'll break that one down over the next couple of days. Big thank you, as always, to our sponsors, my brothers, Rick and Rob, over at DLR Vinyl Products, locations in Calgary and Edmonton, Park Mazda, Belvan Construction, DeBoer's Golf Shop, and of course, Average Joe's Sports Bar in Sherwood Park. Thanks for checking us out again, folks. This has been Got Your Back, presented by DLR Vinyl Products.